Hi everyone. Welcome to this Cambridge Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring webinar on the Cambridge Wellbeing Check. So I have just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Please note that your microphones are muted, so we can't hear any members of the audience, and this is to help ensure good sound quality. If you'd like to ask questions though, please put them in the questions section, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen in the GoToWebinar control panel. You can put questions in the chat as well if you prefer. We'll have some time at the end to answer questions wherever you put them. You'll receive a certificate of attendance, which will be sent to your email inbox 1 hour after the webinar finishes. And you'll receive a copy of the webinar recording and the slides sent to you via email next week. So just a little bit about CHEM, which is the Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring. So we've been working with schools for 40 years in over 100 countries, and we're known for our evidence-based research approach to baseline and formative assessments, using extensive data sets to support future outcomes and development. We work with schools, ministries, and associations to transform the outcomes of the students they teach. And in 2019, we became part of the University of Cambridge, which has supported our reach and abilities to support young people across the world. We help teachers turn data into knowledge. We bridge the gap between research and practice, and we provide evidence to support good decision-making. So with that being said, I'll hand over to Mark Frazer, who's our teaching and learning lead, to find out a little bit more about the Cambridge Wellbeing Check. So over to you, Mark.
Thanks very much, Megan, and thanks everybody for coming along. So a little bit about myself. I've been with CHEM. Sometimes, if you've known about us for a while, you've possibly referred to us as CHEM. Our new name, since we moved to Cambridge, is the Cambridge Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring. I've been a teacher and a head teacher in the northeast of England, and about it was in 2015 I joined CHEM as the teaching and learning lead. So today I'm going to give you an overview of what well-being is, talk about why we think it's important for learners, and following that I'll explain a little bit about why we should assess well-being and tell you about the Cambridge Wellbeing Check. And then to finish off with, we'll think about how we might be able to improve well-being for our students in our own settings. And at the end, as Megan said, we will do our best to answer any questions that you have, and we can either save them till the end or drop them into the questions box as we go, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So until recently, there were some indications that for many people, the quality of life was improving. And in 2020, this particular survey was published. This data was in this OECD report was based on data gathered from across the world. How's life 2020? And one of the quotes is, in many ways life's getting better. The good news is that well-being in some respects improved relative to 2010, a year when the impacts of the financial crisis of the previous decade had been felt in many OECD countries, and people are living longer, safer lives. On the other side of the coin, they do point out that, looking forward, there's no room for complacency. Storm clouds seem to be gathering on the horizon, and there are things that we do need to sort of think about, moving forward. And that was published in March 2020. And I think you can probably think back to what happened in sort of mid-March 2020. We think the world almost was turned on its head with the pandemic. Since then, we've had war, deepening environmental worries, the cost of living crisis, fuel poverty, all of these things have emerged, and my goodness, what next? I think adults and young people alike are arguably far more anxious about daily life than they were just 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And if one good thing has come out of the recent past, it's perhaps that the importance of personal well-being is far more prominent now than it ever has been. But, what do we mean by well-being? So particularly, in the context of schools or colleges. I've got a couple of examples of surveys from around the UK. The first one, the Scottish Health Survey, and there's some fairly sort of depressing statistics in this. About 1 in 4 people are estimated to be affected by mental health problems in Scotland in any one year. Mental health in adolescence increases the risk of subsequent mental health in later life. And from this, this publication, they use the scale called the Warwick Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale. And interestingly, it says that things are quite stable, that for children and young people, especially between the ages of 13 and 15, nothing really has changed. But if we look at another report, this covers all of the UK, not just Scotland. This is the Good Childhood Report from the Children's Society. They describe a very different trend, and they use admittedly, this is a different survey. This is the British Household Survey, and the graphs that they show tell a very different tale. Some good news in that life at home is generally quite stable for most respondents, but if you look at life satisfaction, life as a whole, that middle graph there, that's definitely on a downward trend. And life in school is a little bit more up and down, but we've got overall, between 2009-10 and the end, when the data was last collected in 1920, we see, a real step down. A bit more erratic, but definitely a downward trend overall. So again, that's based on data from across the UK, 5,000 households across the UK and 1,500 of them being in Scotland. So reassuring in some ways about family, but worrying in other ways about life in school. So our recent work has been based on research from the Faculty of Education in Cambridge and a specific report from Ros McClellan and Susan Stewart, and they reviewed a wide range of literature looking at young people's well-being in school, because there are quite a few surveys out there about well-being of children and young people, but very few of them focus on school directly. And in this paper, the authors argue that as educators, it's important to investigate well-being in the school context. And if this is understood, and more importantly, can be changed, well, then this will enable far more young people to flourish. So they have a theoretical model, which includes 4 areas of well-being. So we have the 2 sort of overarching areas of feelings and functioning. How do young people feel in school, and how do they function in a learning environment? And then feelings and functioning are then subdivided into 4 areas. So we've got life satisfaction, how content students are with their lives as a whole. Negative emotions, how inclined they are to dwell on negative thoughts, or how they display anxiety, or stress, or sadness. On the functioning side, we have the interpersonal well-being. So how much students experience, they feel connected to others and feel that they are cared for and valued. And finally, the 4th one, competence well-being, how they feel about being equipped to succeed in the educational setting, and further down the line, how they feel they're equipped to succeed in later life. So that's the theoretical model behind the wellbeing check we have produced. We are going to have a look at that in a little while, but just before we get there, just a few things that the researchers also point out. That well-being is a subjective psychological state, so that means it can change. It may change from month to month or even day to day, and it also changes from one context to another. So students' well-being may be high at home but low in school, or vice versa. And because well-being is a psychological state, 2 children in identical material or physical circumstances may experience very different levels of well-being. So that in short, one child may feel much happier than another despite their similar backgrounds. So how on earth do we find out how children are really feeling? Well, we would suggest we must ask them. And we need to do that in a structured way. Again, a little bit more about how we can do that in a little while. But why do we think well-being is important, particularly in the context of school? We would suggest well-being is essential to academic success. Again, not particularly surprising, perhaps, but there's lots of evidence out there in the academic literature that tells us that, better well-being is linked with motivation. Students want to learn and make progress if they're feeling more positive. Certainly linked with engagement. And we know students who are disengaged are likely to show lower levels of well-being and are likely to truant, to skip school. We know it's a really important metric in school life in terms of your attendance figures. You're judged as a school, you're measured as a school on that. And it's no surprise that if students aren't in school, well, it's highly likely that they're not learning. And that's a problem, because that knocks on to all other facets of their lives here in the present and certainly in the future. So further evidence comes from a variety of research sources here. We've got researchers in the UK and in the USA who've identified correlations between well-being and educational performance. As I said, probably not surprised to think that if you're well motivated, you're engaged, you're probably going to do better than those who aren't. And then a paper from Cambridge researchers Irenka Suto and Tom Benton from last year shows that in their literature review, they've focused on the fact that we kind of know about the motivation and the engagement, but at a systematic level, there is evidence between well-being and attainment and the whole school approaches to well-being and attainment and how they are implemented. Basically, if you have a robust system within your school, then you are far more likely to be tuned in to what students are feeling and thinking, and you are certainly more tuned into what you can do about improving outcomes for them. Again, looking at a couple of things from the UK political landscape. In Scotland, we have the mental health strategy, a 10-year plan, which has been running since 2017. And it's basically explaining that it's there to make sure that children and young people are included, engaged, and involved in education, because that is fundamental to achievement and attainment in school. Support from teachers and other school staff is vital. And all staff in schools have a responsibility to support the development of the mental, emotional, social, and physical well-being of pupils. It's part of what this document refers to and is known as responsibility of all. Again, similar documentation in the UK, which we'll come to in a little while, but I suppose just want to pause at this point and just think, why should we assess well-being in schools? Why should we be asking young people about it? And I think the answer is similar to the question you could ask about any academic pursuits in school. Why should we assess anything? Well, if you can measure or assess something, you obtain better information about it and you increase your understanding of it. And this then puts you in a much stronger position if you need to make decisions or take action. And we certainly think it's as true of well-being as it is of geography, maths, literacy, art, all the other subjects in the curriculum. And using a well-being check, whether it's our product or somebody else's, should be able to help you do several different things. It would be good if you could use it to teach and explore well-being with students. In your, perhaps could be done in a pastoral group, social groups, form groups, PH, SCHE lessons, all of those sorts of things that you do on a regular basis in school. It's really important that you explain to students what well-being is and how they can sort of help to manage their own well-being. If you are using a measurement tool, a survey, if you like, you are able to then evaluate the well-being of groups of students and perhaps, depending on how granular that is, individual students' well-being levels. Then you can do couple of things. You can identify problems and direct resources and put plans in place to address those issues. And then if you run the survey again, well, that allows you to evaluate the impact of your interventions and allows you to see, has it worked? Has well-being improved? Or do we need to think again? Do we need to try something else? So a little bit about our wellbeing check itself. The Wellbeing Check's recently been nominated for one of the awards at the BET show in London in March this year. And it's a very simple and effective tool, we think, and it involves no paper. It runs on any PC, laptop, or tablet, and it's quick and easy to set up and use. It's a very short survey, uses 22 questions. It's flexible, you can use it at any time, and you can use it throughout the year as many times as you need to use it. And it's a simple, very simple, oh, beg your pardon for skipping on there. So very, very simple survey type questionnaire. And we've got some very clearly and simply presented questions or statements. And the students follow through and they click one of the 5 responses. So you've got just very basic things like, when I'm at school, I feel happy. So there's nothing complicated about this. So this can be used with quite young children up to, from primary age up to children in, or students in secondary education and up to sort of tertiary education as well. It's constructed very simply, and the wording is taken directly from the academic paper that I showed you a few minutes ago for a couple of reasons, so that the statements or the questions aren't misunderstood or misinterpreted, and they can be easily accessed by children of various levels of literary ability, or perhaps students for whom English is an additional language. They're also sort of presented in 2 different ways. We have a positive scale and a negative scale. So you can have an inbuilt sort of common sense check. Some of the questions, like when I'm in school, I feel happy. When I'm in school, I feel sad. That's an example of a positive phrased question and a negatively phrased one. So if a student was simultaneously always happy and always sad, that's just a little indicator that they've probably just clicked through this questionnaire, which is revealing in itself. And it's probably a cue for a discussion. We do not present this as being diagnostic in any way. This is a questionnaire or a system that you can use to very quickly and effectively identify common problems in your student body as a whole, or in the case of an individual student, see if there is something particular there. I mean, if they had, for example, just clicked through randomly and had produced sort of contradictory results, then that's a sign of disengagement in itself. Again, just opening the door to conversations, highlighting areas of concern for individuals and groups. And we have a battery of reports which go with it, and I'm just going to skip through a few of them. I think there are 14 altogether. I'm just going to show you a few, and when the slides come, you will be able to see all of this in close-up detail. So I apologize, some of the text is quite small, so I don't expect you to be able to read this, but if you just hang on and see the slides, you'll be able to zoom in and see the finer detail, but I'll just explain a little bit about the reports. So the first one I'm just going to show you here is just a very simple tick box report where we have, for one student, how they responded. So just a tick in alongside each question what their answer was. We highlight areas where we think there may be concern, so you can see where I feel confident appears there. Isaac, in this case, has said that he never feels confident. So we're just drawing attention to your eye as a teacher. So these reports are not sent directly to the students. They're held in the system itself, and teachers have the opportunity to look at them first, to screen them before you share any information with students, because we need to remember every time we're asking about this, we've got to be very sensitive about it. And some of the reports are designed for sharing with students and others are confidential to school staff. So this report is to be given to individual students, and we've taken out the data and we have just shown the kind of descriptive phrases about their responses for the boxes that they ticked. So we use that information and we produce a little summary of how the student felt. And there's always a reassuring comment appears on the bottom of the report. This is a confidential group overview for teachers, and again, it's a little bit more technical. This is the kind of data that you might wish to use within your management information system at school, or in other sort of monitoring activities. But basically, we see quite a precise response for each of the students in the 4 areas. So we've got the average score, if you like, the mean score, and again we highlight any areas of concern with the red numbers with the pink shading around them. Again, you can see at a glance how students are sort of feeling, and basically, as with most assessment data, we're looking to see the bulk of the students more or less occupying the centre ground, and it's the extremities that we need to be on the lookout for. With that in mind, we will highlight. In this case, this student has responded very positively on the whole in the first 3 areas of well-being, but quite negatively in the last area. So we thought that just does not sit alongside the other results. So that's flagged as being an area for further discussion. Again, we're not revealing anything about what the problem might be, but we've got somebody who is generally feeling quite positive about things. They're really buoyant, but they're saying that they have a lot of negative emotions. And again, this is just sign pointing that this is a child or a student who you'd want to sensitively and discreetly have a more detailed conversation with. So that color coding is just drawing your eye to potential problems. We have another for group student, a group we could present to a group of students, and you could use this alongside some of the lesson plans we have. For instance, if you've done the wellbeing check, you've got the data back, it's a great activity, a great idea to think about looking at the group's data as a whole. It's anonymized, and we can see that as a group, we're tending to be quite positive about things. But on this particular example, with this 6 group here, for example, we've got sort of slightly lower results coming in for competence well-being. So the students are feeling quite confident about most things. They're managing their emotions well, but they just don't feel quite well enough equipped to be, dealing with the activities that they're doing in school. And perhaps that's something that, again, it's just opening another door to a different conversation about how you might do this. This is something that as a staff you'd be looking at and thinking, well, is this about study skills? Do we need to be sort of preparing children differently for the kinds of things they're doing in class, or is this relating to examination anxiety or test anxiety? We just don't know. But again, we're highlighting a general theme that has been flagged by the group, and it's up to you in your own settings to then sort of make further inquiries. And again, apologies for the tiny writing. I don't pretend you can read that, but in the handbook with the wellbeing setting comes an overview of the reports, and it's a little table that shows you the name of the report, what it tells us, the content, and situations that you might choose to use it. As mentioned, we have some lesson plans which are quite detailed. These documents. There's one for the various key stages that you can see there, and coming soon for Key Stage 5, or the equivalent age range. We have the idea that you can take this as a script and use it wholesale, or as most good teachers do, they cherry pick from it and make it their own. And again, you can just do whatever you feel with that. And generally, these documents have 2 parts to them. There's the build-up, the introduction of well-being, why it's important, what it is, and then an introductory section on the wellbeing check itself. And then at the end of the process, you can follow it up with a follow-up lesson where maybe you're looking at individuals data or at group data. Again, up to you to decide how you use it, but very flexible, and all sorts of support available from us. The documentation that comes with the package, Chem customer support team, and we have our online support hub as well. Now, finally then, just to round off, I'd just like to think about, if I was sort of back in school, what might I be doing to improve well-being in schools, or in my particular setting? And then again, you might just want to have a think about what you could do in your particular setting as well. We've got, again, a couple of examples of government guidance. When you get the slides, you'll be able to follow the link. I think you'll be able to just kind of click on the cover of the report there. And if that doesn't work, there is a link at the bottom. And failing that, right at the end, we've got some references to useful documents and sources of information as well. But monitoring and improving well-being understands a clear understanding of the issues that are most important in your school, and you've got to decide what are the priority areas to focus upon. But at the same time, you've got to kind of take into consideration the requirements which are handed down from government, and certainly going back to the mental health strategy from Scotland, the first ambition in the strategy there, the prevention and early intervention, is to make sure that every child and young person has appropriate access to emotional and mental well-being support in school. So in your setting, you need to have a system for making sure that you know who needs the support and a way of deciding what it is you need to do. Again, finding out about well-being using the questionnaire that we've suggested you use, or indeed any other questionnaire, you need to set up a working group which is visibly supported by senior leaders. You can have a well-informed discussion involving all stakeholders. So moving on for another idea as to how, if you haven't already got a policy, or you would like to create your own policy, or just review it because it's been in place for a few years, from central government in Westminster, this is quite a useful document. It's a few years old now, and it's still quite useful, I think. And this is something that I would be looking at if I was back in school now. It describes 8 principles of a whole school or college approach to promoting mental health and well-being. It's a few, again, fairly sort of worrying facts that it sort of relays early on, in terms of 1 in 6 children between the ages of 5 and 16 have a probable mental disorder, and that's an increase just over the previous 3 years, from 1 in 9 in 2017. And as we know, the recent events have resulted in fundamental changes in the lives of children and young people. So more about the model. And what the priority areas are to focus upon, as we decided. So of the 8 areas, I would suggest that using a well-being check will allow you to focus in on at least 3 of these things in the first instance. So basically, you are enabling the student voice. You are asking them what they feel, what they think, and that can be used to influence decisions on a personal, on a group, and a school level. Just backtracking around from that. So once you have identified these areas of concern, then again, one of the duties of school leaders is to make sure that that curriculum, that the program of study, the teaching and learning is directed at promoting well-being and promoting resilience, support, and all of those things that go around the holistic wraparound care that we like to give to our students. And once you've identified them and you've done something about it, again, using the check in a follow-up mode will allow you to see how effective your interventions have been. And again, our check or any other checks should help you to do this if you have thought through your strategy. Again, once you've found things out, that there are certain issues, you're probably going to think, oh my goodness, what are we going to do about it? Because some things out there are quite, without question that you will be uncovering sensitive and quite worrying situations in some cases, and you need to know what to do. So you have support in school, hopefully you have support in your your federation of schools, your group of schools, or your local authority. But there are external support sources as well, and we are not directly linked to the Anna Freud charity, but we would like to just point out that this is an excellent website that you should have a look at if you haven't already seen it. Some really good advice and guidance there on steps, 5 steps to improving mental health and well-being. Some really nice resources there. Again, I've been to a conference not long ago and somebody else was showing this to the audience as well. So it's not just me who likes this, it's definitely worth a look. And various sources of guidance from ourselves will be available soon. We've got signposts to other resources on the web, other charitable organizations, but please do check that you consider the content in some of these sources of evidence and guidance to be appropriate for your setting, because sometimes there are possibly culturally or age inappropriate things for students, particularly in a primary setting. You might not want to be talking about the sorts of things that you'd want to talk about with with teenagers, as an example. And again, there's a specific page within the Anna Freud resources there which relates to Scotland. Again, that can be linked through Anna Freud or through mentallyhealthyschools.org.uk. It's got a really nice section there on understanding the mental health landscape in Scotland, with links to various support documents and sources of other sort of evidence and guidance. And then a nice, in the darker green box to the bottom right there, some links to mental health on the curriculum in Scotland as well. So again, helping you to provide again all-round support for the students in your care. And then, just to round off before we see if there are any questions, there's just always one more thing we can do, and something that's very simple and something that we can all do is just to make sure that every student has formed at least one strong, supportive, professional and appropriate relationship with an adult in school, particularly those students who are maybe new to your school or who are known to move around through, for positive or less than positive reasons. They are probably the most vulnerable, and it's vital that when you're new in a new setting, you have somebody to turn to, somebody to ask for support and advice. Because there's nothing worse, I think we can all identify with this as adults who've gone into a new workplace, or if you think back to when we were in school, if you were the new person, it can be quite tricky. And also, it's the quiet ones we need to watch out for. And we think using an anonymous and confidential and sensitively handled questionnaire will just allow you to find out from children who are reluctant to say anything, who are just lacking that confidence to come and seek help. So having that nurturing, supportive, caring atmosphere and a one-to-one contact is absolutely invaluable. So thank you very, very much for listening. We've got some sources of further information here on the screen. You can find out more by going to our website about wellbeing in general, or if you're interested in buying the Wellbeing Check there. And then I'm hoping Megan's going to come back on the line and help me out with questions. And if we've got anything in the chat box, we'll do our best to answer it.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was great. I'm just having a look at the questions. Doesn't look like there have been any that have come through yet. But yeah, just a reminder that we'll be sending the slides and the recording around within the next week or so. And if any questions come up maybe after the webinar, or after you've had a chance to look at any of the additional resources, please feel free to get in touch at chem@cambridge.org, or there's a contact form on our website as well, which, please feel free to get in touch if you've got any additional questions or you want to chat to somebody further about the Wellbeing Check. Still no questions, so I think we'll end it there. A massive thank you to Mark for presenting and to all of you for attending, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks very much.